training camp is next, and there's a ton of 49er news that came by this past week and the week before that. More on that after this.
Let's go get him. Let's go get him today, man. Let's go. Hey, dominate on 3. 1, 2, 3, dominate.
What's going on, everybody? We're back with another episode of 49ers Red Zone. I'm your host, Rohan Chakravarthi, and there's your other host, Marco Martinez. How are you doing today, Marco?
I'm doing great. Just got out of work. Time to talk 49er football, and then take a stressful test, and then watch the Golden State Warriors go up 3-2 on the Boston Celtics tonight. It's going to be a great night. Order some dinner. Make it easy.
Oh yeah, most definitely. I mean that game is gonna be a blast, especially after how the last one went. You know, we coming back to Chase Center and all that. But you're right. We're here to talk some 49ers football. And I mean, we got some good news this past week. 49ers minicamp just concluded. Kyle Shanahan cut the third day, and the biggest headline was obviously Debo Samuel, Nick Bosa, Trent Williams. All three were in attendance, with two of them seeking new contracts. It was important and a prerogative that they show up, given how other situations in other cities have boiled out. And both of them did show up on the first day of training camp. Debo Samuel and Nick Bosa showed up, having passed their physicals. And so, what do you take away from that news?
I think it's obviously fantastic news, right? Seeing those guys show up. It's one of those ones where, especially Debo Samuel, right? Like everyone's like, "Oh, Debo's not going to show up." I thought he wasn't going to show up if I was him, but he did do what I technically said he would do, which is sit in. I mean, you show up to training, you show up to minicamp, and you don't practice, which is like the new way of actually sitting out without being fined and without losing that accrued season, which I did say he would do, but it's not the actual sit out or the holdout that NFL has been used to because of the new CBA and everything. So it's great to see him there. Love seeing Debo Samuel there. Obviously, he's throwing the ball, playing catch with Kyle Shanahan's son Carter. That was phenomenal to see. But just having him back there in the facility with the team, being back, seeing him on social media in 49ers gear, that's amazing to see as a 49ers fan. And at the end of the day, all we could ask for is 49ers to just pay the man what he wants and get things going, because obviously he's going to get paid, and obviously Bosa's going to get paid. And what I do love about Bosa is not like, so we saw his brother hold out, right? We saw his brother do his antics to get his paycheck. What I love about Bosa is he showed up and he actually participated in individual drills, right? And that's stuff that we need from veterans, from our captains, because obviously Nick Bosa is a leader. He is a veteran. Like, he is that guy who needs to take that step and just lead the whole team, because honestly, he's the best player on the 49ers. Him and Trent Williams are the two best players on the 49ers roster. Whether fans agree or don't agree, those are the two top guys. If we're talking top five, they're top 2, 3. Like, those are the main dudes, right?
Yeah.
So seeing Bosa there, working with Drake Jackson, working with the rest of the defensive line, I love seeing Nick Bosa do stuff like that.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I mean, I didn't know what exactly Debo Samuel, like you said, you convinced me that I feel like it was going to be that hold in type of thing. I was excited though that he was actually on the field for a little bit. He was in the weight room for a little bit, is what was reported. So he was doing like individual drills, I'll call them. Nick Bosa was actually out on the field. That was nice to see, and it's also nice to see that he doesn't care about his contract. It's his agent that's letting him handle, and that's a smart way to do, right? Obviously, it doesn't seem like the likelihood of injury in this situation is very, very minimal. So he practices just these 2 days. Kyle Shanahan cancels the third day, and I think both players come into training camp with contract situations resolved. Be it they either have their contract for 2022, like an extension, or they choose to wait. In terms of Bosa's case, he chooses to wait and bet on himself and get a bigger contract next offseason, like his brother Joey did after his fourth offseason back with the Chargers. So I think, yeah, I think this is a good period because I think the 49ers are going to be united come training camp time with their entirety of their roster there, with all the contract situations resolved. And that's a good thing because that's the most important time for a rapport between Debo Samuel and Trey Lance.
And the good thing with like Nick Bosa, like the reason why he can wait, right, is because he's actually a much bigger contract than what Debo Samuel had, right? Because obviously he was the second overall pick in the NFL draft. So like he has that luxury of like, you know what? Well, I've already gotten paid pretty decent money on my rookie deal. Like I'm not getting underpaid for the most part. Like obviously he is because of the fact that he's already outplayed his rookie contract. What he's done for the 49ers defense has been so incredible. But we talk about like the actual contract, right? So Debo Samuel, his contract was a 4-year, $7 million deal versus Nick Bosa was a 4-year, $33 million deal that turns into even a bigger contract because at the end he has a $17 million fifth-year option. But like he had 33 million guaranteed at signing versus Debo had like I want to say 4 of that 7 million was guaranteed at signing.
Yeah,
So for Nick Bosa, it makes more sense to be like, you know what? I'm going to take the professional approach about it. Let my agent handle it. And if the Niners want to do a contract now, I'm going to sign it. But if they don't, guess what? They're going to have to pay me fully guaranteed money in about 2 years. So if I sit out, I might get the because what Deshaun Watson did. We're gonna start seeing it with these big time players. We already saw it with Aaron Donald, right? Pretty much getting fully guaranteed money now. Like that's the wave of the new contract. So if Nick Bosa does bet on himself, he's probably gonna get almost most of his contract fully guaranteed. And that's what a player Nick Bosa's caliber should be hoping for. So if he doesn't sign this year or this offseason, he's gonna be getting paid bank next year because it's gonna be fully guaranteed.
yeah, definitely. And I mean, Nick Bosa, I don't think is in any I don't think he's in any hurry. Nonetheless, the one caveat obviously is his injury history, where he's torn ACLs multiple times in his past, be it in college or in the NFL. He's had a torn pec. So I'm not saying he's injury prone, but he's had injuries before that can be he's had injuries of a severe magnitude before. And so that might push him and his agent to try and get a deal done this offseason, especially because all the major deals have been done, right? You talk about TJ Watt, you talk about Miles Garrett, you talk about Joey Bosa, and now Aaron Donald. All these major deals for edge rushers have been done. And so Nick Bosa, I don't think there's a hurry this offseason necessarily in terms of when you do it this offseason, because I don't think there's a deal that happens after the ones that we've seen to the magnitude that we've seen. So, but I do think that Nick Bosa, it would be in his best interest to get a deal done this offseason, although I wouldn't be surprised if he waited. Now, if we talk about the cap situation, right? The 49ers did get a little bit of an insurance policy once the retirement of Alex Mack was announced. They now have over 4 million in cap space, even with their draft class signed, and so I think they can shoulder the extensions of both Nick Bosa and Debo Samuel, especially if Nick Bosa's because Nick Bosa's contract is already has his 5th-year option guaranteed. Most of the money will be impacted next year, and so Debo Samuel, all it really matters is the signing bonus that he gets. That's what impacts his contract this year. Because really, you'll reduce the base salary to about $1 million, and then if the signing bonus is 4 or 5 million, then the entire contract or the cap hit for 2022 is 6 million, right? Something like that.
And like you said, so right, you said like the cap, like the little wiggle room they have. So they're gonna get another big chunk of money, right? Whether that's when they cut Jimmy Garoppolo or whether they trade Jimmy Garoppolo, they're gonna get a good chunk of money, which is around $25 million, 20 $25 million, however it works out, right?
Right.
But that money, really, realistically, that money could be handed out to players like on the roster, for example, like extensions, or it could be like, for example, the 49ers are doing great in the season, right? Let's say they're one of the teams where they look phenomenal during the season, but they're one piece away. The 49ers feel like they're one piece away, right? Feel like they're a safety away because Hufanga isn't playing great, or they feel like they're a center away, a right tackle, whatever the case may be. They have that luxury to go out and trade for a guy if they really need to because of the cap space that they're going to get with the Jimmy Garoppolo contract being shipped away. So for me, it's like one of those ones where that Alex Mack, like that cap hit, that save and everything, that $4 million is great for players they could sign this year because honestly, it's not going to affect them in terms of actual cap money because, like you said, the signing bonus is really what they really pay. So for me, I'm excited because if the 49ers are in contention for the Super Bowl, like which I think they really should be with Trey Lance under center, I'm excited to see the 49ers make that big splash that the Los Angeles Rams have made, that the Buccaneers have made. Buccaneers made a couple decent trades that actually helped them get over the hump and stuff like that. So I'm excited to see if John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan believe this roster is so strong mid-season that at the trade deadline that they actually make a big-time trade.
Yeah, and the one point that you made that is really important, the luxury. It doesn't mean you are required to make a move. It doesn't mean the 49ers roster will have a hole that glaring that you need to make a move. But the point that the 49ers like and that we're stressing is flexibility. And I think that that's really, really, really important for the 49ers. And we'll get to the comment in a minute because I wanted to publicly congratulate my brother here. But really what we're talking about is it's super important for the flexibility to be able to attain a player. And if you keep Jimmy Garoppolo for this on this roster for week one, that flexibility is gone because you want to make sure that 24.2 million of his salary remains non-guaranteed. If you cut him, if you trade him, you get an influx of cash where you can make sure you safely extend both of those guys without having any worries for adding extra guaranteed money in expense of the signing bonus. And then additionally, you can get guys midseason, you can get guys early season, because one thing the 49ers haven't been devoid of is injuries. And so if the 49ers face a big time injury at a position where they're weak of in depth, you can go ahead and you can trade for an asset like the Rams did last year with Von Miller, like they've done with Odell Beckham Jr. The reason that other teams can't financially or can't get them is because of financials. They don't have the cap space for it. But when you have the cap space for it midseason, you're a number one contender to get them because not only do they want incentive-based contracts, players that get cut midseason, they also want a chance to compete for a championship, which the 49ers should be able to provide come that point. But let's get to Jesse's comment here. Marco looks like a new man after his recent personal news. Congratulations, brother. I don't know if I'm allowed to say it, so I'll let you share it. But I wanted to also say congratulations to you. I'm so blessed for you, and I know how freaked out you were in the moment after that, and I just wanted to say thank you so much for being with this on this ride with me for the time, and congratulations to you, man.
Yeah, so I haven't announced it yet to like Twitter world or YouTube or anything. I've told a couple of my very close friends and everything, but I have gotten engaged the last week. So I got on Monday I got engaged, proposed to my fiance now. That's what have to call her now, right? I'm sure it's very weird having to call someone like go from girlfriend to like fiance and everything, but with her forever. Finally had to do it. I mean, it was time. So I'm engaged. I do look like a new man because I just got off of work, Jesse. Not because I just got engaged, my man.
Hey,
Because I just got off of work and I went straight to the camera, man. But thank you, Jesse. I really appreciate you. But now going back to football, right? Because it's a football podcast. I mean, talk about my personal stuff on another day. Nah. But going back to football, right? So like you're saying, like the luxury and everything, because there's gonna be those like you're saying the veterans that like just
right.
trade me. Like I'm tired of it, and there might be a couple guys that could eventually pay off for the 49ers. I mean, if we look at some of the rosters, there's players on every roster that they have the capability of being a legit player for the 49ers. The player that I'm looking at, and it doesn't sound like they're getting the contract done, but I would definitely be willing to bring him in. It's a guy like Jesse Bates, right? So midseason, if I don't think the Bengals are going to repeat and do what they did last year. But if midseason they're struggling, which I think they might struggle a little bit because they had obviously a historic season for themselves. That division, AFC, that division is so strong. I don't think they're going to do what they want. And if they're struggling, I don't think he wants to be there, right? Because his contract has kind of like ruffled feathers. So the 49ers can mid-season, they have enough to pay him. They have enough to keep guys around. That is a guy that could be like, you know what? Jesse Bates and Jimmy Ward would be a phenomenal duo heading into the playoffs. That's something they could do. So stuff like that, like just the luxury of being able to make trades for key guys. Like that's what you want to do when the time comes. Um, Going into the offensive line, right? Because we could always make trades for the offensive line. Jake Brendall was hyped up by Trent Williams and Kyle Shanahan. So originally, I didn't think he was going to be the center, right? Like everyone, oh, it's probably Daniel Brunskill, Jake Brendel, maybe the Nick, what's his name? I don't, you know how to say his last name. I don't.
Zakel.
Zakel. I was going to say Zach was Zakel. So I
Yeah.
was thinking more Zakel than the other guys, but Jake Brendel's being hyped up. Is that something the 49er fans should be excited about? That Jake Brendel will be the future center of the 49ers, at least going into this year? Or should we actually be worried and actually start discussing who the 49ers should trade for or what they should do at the center position?
I personally, so for the past 2 weeks or so, before like these guys came out, I dug into the relationship between Trey Lance and Jake Brendel, and I actually said during a 49ers web zone roundtable that Jake Brendel would be the starting center for the 49ers in 2022. Not like to me, I understand the question marks, right? But I'll look at these factors. The rapport with Trey Lance. Trey Lance came into this last year as a rookie without having any NFL experience, of course, and he played on the second team. He played behind Jimmy Garoppolo, who worked with Alex Mack. So who did Trey Lance work with? The second team center. It was Jake Brendel. Jake Brendel and Trey Lance had the majority of the offseason reps last offseason, and then obviously worked together throughout the majority of last season when Trey Lance was working with the twos and working on scout team. And then when you fast forward to this offseason, Trey Lance has only gotten his reps with Jake Brendel at center. Then we hear what these guys have to say. Trey Lance actually says, despite his pedigree of calling all the protections at NDSU, he has the mind for it. Jake Brendel handles all of that. Jake Brendel handles the protections. He handles all the necessities for the offensive line. So he has the mind for it, and it seems like he's the one in charge, which Alex Mack had that role last year. And so when Kyle Shanahan wants that center, he wants a commanding center. He wants a center that can be in charge, that can display that type of leadership. And Jake Brendel, at least in the early stages, has shown he can provide that. And then the third factor is, what do the 49ers want in an offensive lineman as well? That's athleticism. Jake Brendel had a 994 RAS score coming out of UCLA. That was the best in his class. He went undrafted because of play concerns, obviously, but still the athleticism was there. That was the best in his draft, and that's the thing. The one factor that everyone's pointed out. Trent Williams pointed out how he's super athletic. Trey Lance pointed it out, and Kyle Shanahan pointed it out. The last factor is offensive lineman Chris Forster, his offensive lineman coach, Chris Forster. Now, Jake Brendel was a backup in Miami. He didn't start much, but Chris Forster sought to bring him in. Chris Forster's told Kyle Shanahan, this is the one guy that I want as a quality backup offensive lineman. Kyle Shanahan looked to sign him during the COVID season. He opted out of the COVID year. Then, this is a backup offensive lineman who isn't a rookie anymore, right? But in 2021, the 49ers went back, reconnected with Jake Brendel, and signed him to a one-year deal again. They sought after him, signed him to a one-year deal, and this time he agreed. And so Jake Brendel's first real true experience with the 49ers was with Trey Lance. And so that's where I'm building this connection with Trey Lance and Jake Brendel. The play is the one question mark. We haven't seen how he can sustain, and he's going to get a huge test against this defensive line in training camp. But at the moment, I believe he's the favorite to start at center for the 49ers.
So yeah, he's the favorite, right? So like you said, like he was obviously with in 2016 through like 2019 or 2018. He was with the Miami Dolphins, and then he was with, I want to say, the Broncos and the Ravens on their practice squad or like on their rosters for like the summer or training camp. And then he wasn't with anyone until the 49ers picked him in 2020 on their practice squad, I believe.
Right.
And so for Jake Brendel to be, actually he opted out, I believe, 2020. He was with the 49ers, he opted out, right?
Yeah.
So hasn't really played. Been around the league for a little while, so he's been around systems, but hasn't played. At the age of 29, your first opportunity to start, it worries me. It really does. I mean, as much as I want to be like, oh, I'm super optimistic that he's going to be a great leader. Obviously, hearing when people were saying, oh, he's like a coach talking to a coach. When Trent Williams says it's like talking to a coach. When all these guys are hyping him up, it's great to hear. But we're just in minicamp. We're not even we're in OTAs. Like this is not even training camp. He's not really going up against a defensive line where he actually has to like pass protect and run block. Like he was like it's hard to get excited. Like and this is me just like thinking like everything through. It's hard to get excited about a guy who's never played and we're literally just in minicamp. I need a true center on the roster, and that's why I think Nick Zakel is better suited to eventually be that long term guy at center than Jake Brendall. He's 29 years old, hasn't really played much in the NFL, but the way I see everything is opportunities in the NFL don't come too often, right? Like a lot of guys in the league who end up getting the boot, going to the CFL or XFL or wherever the case they may go, or might not even ever have a chance. It's because of opportunity. So if Jake Brendel uses opportunity to show what he is, then great. But I'm very worried about that center position. I'm not so worried about left guard and right guard. I think Aaron Banks is going to be totally fine. He's being hyped up by a lot of guys. I'm not I'm not excited about him because he's being hyped up. I'm actually excited about him because I thought he was a solid pick when the 49ers actually drafted him. And right guard, I think they'll figure it out with Jalen Moore or whoever the case may be. I don't think Daniel Brunson was the answer at right guard either. I think that knee tendonitis will be a big hit on him. So that's just how I feel about Jake Brendel right now.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the concerns are fair because, like you said, he hasn't played. And I'll shed one other concern that might be not as well known. Jake Brendel had one starting opportunity in his career so far. He was a backup in Miami for 2 straight years, in 2016 and 2017 when he went undrafted. 2018 was his first chance to start. He started 3 games, only committed one penalty during that time, but then he got injured and he went on IR and missed the entire season. So I won't say injury history because he hasn't had much playing time, but the one time that he was a starter, he got injured and he missed the entire season. So that is one cause for concern. You don't want Jake Brendel, if he's your starting center, the guy that Trey Lance has worked with for the entirety of his career, to go down with an injury. And speaking on Nick Zakel, I'm very high on him, and I don't think Jake Brendel actually is a starting center for the future. I think he is a bridge option, and I think because he's been in this system for the past year, because he's worked with Lance, he has a better knowledge of the offense at this moment. That's why he's able to use his mind to the ability that he has. And to me, I think that that's important for 2022. I think Nick Zakel should be the backup for 2022 and be taught the 49ers offense under the tutelage of the offensive line coach, Chris Forster, and Jake Brendel in preparation to being the starter in 2023 for years to come.
So talking about so we heard a lot of things, right? And during the mini camp and everything, there was a lot of drop balls reported by Grant Kahn through Brandon Ayuk, right? Everyone was phenomenal about everyone was raving about Trey Lance. Everyone was so all that excitement, all that love and the as everyone should be excited because Trey Lance is going to be a hell of a player. Everyone should be excited. Don't get me wrong. But all that hype around Trey Lance kind of took away from all these drop balls by Brandon Ayuk. Does that worry you for Brandon Ayuk not taking that leap, that next step going into his third year? Or are you like, oh, well, like it is just mini camp and he's getting used to Trey Lance, but he actually worked with Trey Lance for a while. So what are your thoughts on Brandon Ayuk dropping a lot of balls? And a few of them, I believe one or two went through his hands that led to an interception.
Yeah, and before I continue, I wanted to say shout out to CJ. Thank you for tuning in. And his point on Brendel working with Lance last season, yeah, that's a good point, and it is an added bonus for Brendel's part in the competition for center. Now, transitioning to Ayuk and what you brought up, I think that when we talk about Brandon Ayuk and the drops, right? Brandon Ayuk hasn't necessarily had a drop issue in his career in the NFL. I think when we talk about drops, Ayuk's been one of the more reliable guys on the 49ers. Debo Samuel has been the one with the drop issue. And throughout the offseason, we've heard nothing but raving reports about the duo between, of course, of Lance and Ayuk. And to me, it is disappointing in a way that Brandon Ayuk is dropping passes in practice. Again, this is without the physicality of the game, which we saw Ayuk embrace over the second half of the season when he was blocking. This is without like a good portion of the game. And I'll just drop this one quote. You talking about practice? You talking about practice? Come on, man. No, I'm joking. But Ayuk, I don't think that this is a big worry. I mean, we've heard so many of these stories now. Jamar Chase and all these other receivers where they have drop issues in practice in the off season, and then just that translates to real game film in the real season. So I'm not too worried about it. Now, if it continues over an entire 3 week period in training camp up until the game, up until like the actual preseason and season starts, then we start to draw a little more iron to it. But before pads are put on, I don't take too much out of it. And right now, he's wide receiver number
So fat. Brendan, you're not fat.
one. Right now, he's wide receiver number one. So that's the most important thing.
So it's funny. So like you know how you quoted Herm Edwards and everything, or we could say Allen Iverson or whatever, because both of them have that same practice video.
Yeah.
I actually met Herm Edwards like a week ago at my local Target. I was like very surprised. Like he was just walking around Target trying to buy stuff, and I'm like, I heard his voice, and I was like, I thought I was hearing things, man. I was going crazy because like sometimes I should be like thinking sports and I'm like stuff like that, and I was like, what the hell? I hear Herm Edwards here, like I'm tripping, like I'm going crazy now. And then I look back and I see someone that looked like Herm Edwards, and I was like, oh, that's not him. Like I'm tripping. And I look again, and it's him. So it's him and his son. His son looks just like him. And I was like, oh, Coach Edward. Like I was like, what the? So it's funny that you drop a quote from him. It's hella funny. But I'm not worried about Brandon Ayuk dropping passes. To be honest, I'll be more worried, like you said. Debo Samuel is the one who has the drop issues in the regular season. Brandon Ayuk really doesn't have that, so I'm not too worried about that. But I am worried about Brandon Ayuk in terms of everything is taking that next step. What is that next step, right? Because his rookie year, he had a phenomenal rookie year, around 900 yards, I believe, 800, 900 yards. Looked
Yeah.
like that dude.
It
Well,
was all games, and it was 748 yards in
it
just
was
12.
748? And
Yeah.
okay, I thought it was 900. I must be thinking of Debo's rookie year. But Brandon Ayuk had like that great rookie year where everyone was like wowed by him. Sometimes he just took over the game. And then last year, he kind of struggles to come out of training camp, gets benched week 1 for Trent Sherfield. And like, it's like, whoa, what's going on? And then he takes off mid-season, just takes off. Like,
Right.
we need him to be able to put everything together, right?
Exactly.
But how do you do that with a coach who last year, like, it's so hard on him, right? Last year, you're super hard on him. And then you get a quarterback change where you might not see the 49ers throw the ball as much to start the season. You might see them go run heavy to allow Trey Lance to get under his feet. But, like, we need him to take that next step. And how does he do that with a new quarterback in this offense?
Now, I'll just say these two things about Brandon Ayuk, right? In 2020, his rookie season, that was the condensed offseason without any with limitations on practice where you can't necessarily have an actual NFL level offseason. Brandon Ayuk had 748 yards in just 12 games. If you put that over a 17-game season, Ayuk drops 1,000 yards. Now, fast forward to last year, despite his slow struggle, right? Just look at week 7 to week 18, or week 8 to week 18, when Brandon Ayuk took off against the Chicago Bears. That was his first game where he had multiple receptions for 45 yards, 4 receptions, 45 yards, where he really took over and then continued his dominance. He had 730 of his 826 yards in that final stretch. If you put that over an 18-game season, it's 1,128 yards. So Ayuk has shown multiple stretches where he's capable of putting together 1,000-yard seasons. Now, like you said, it's all about putting it together. The one thing going in his benefit is this rookie quarterback seems to like him, seems to want to target him as that number one option. And even if the 49ers throw less, the 49ers are getting more out of what they're like kind of getting more from each throw from their quarterback. Look at week 17 last year. Trey Lance threw just 23 passes and threw for 248 yards, well over 10 yards per attempt. And I'm not saying that that's sustainable over a 17-game season. I'm not. But I'm saying that he has the ability to do so, ability to stretch the field, which can really maximize Brandon Ayuk's own traits. And so I expect Brandon Ayuk's yards per catch or yards per whatever you want to call it, yards per attempt, yards per catch, to significantly increase, meaning you don't necessarily need the amount of volume to get to that 1,000-yard season. And so that's where I think Brandon Ayuk's numbers should go up. It's now all about how can you make that connection better, and what does Brandon Ayuk need to do in terms of preparation to make sure that he's in the good works of his coach, of his quarterback, and all of that to put forth a 1,000-yard season, and how can he remain consistent over an 18-game period?
No, I think you hit everything, right? Like you're talking about like what he needs to be able to do and all this stuff, and he's shown the ability. So we just have to finally see it in year 3 because having to pay him and Debo is what I want. Like I want the 49ers to be forced to pay him and Debo Samuel big time money because that's gonna be the first time we've had a legit receiver duo that we've had in a very long time. Now that we have Danny Gray coming along, Jawan Jennings, we're finally gonna have a legit receiving room. And if he takes that next step, this offense is gonna explode drastically. So that's what I'm excited for. That's what I want to see the 49ers do. Now, taking it over to the defensive side of the ball, right? So we're hearing that Hufanga's supposed to start. We're hearing that Womack was getting a lot of looked phenomenal in the slot. We're hearing that Emmanuel Mosley and Charvarius Ward look very, very good. How does our secondary after minicamp? What do you think about our secondary after minicamp? Prior then, or cool. What's the difference? So, right, like you had an opinion on them prior to minicamp. What's your opinion now headed forward?
So minicamp was interesting, right? We, like you said, we've heard a good of reports. On the outside, I've been content the entire time. I don't think that that's changed. On the inside, I think I've become a little more confused, and it's not necessarily in a bad way. But we started this offseason program with Darqueze Dennard in the slot. We're playing, at least Sam Womack is, at least in rookie minicamp, started on the outside with Tariq Castro Fields. So the 49ers, at the end of the season, or I mean, at the end of the draft, they said that they envisioned Sam Womack as a slot corner. I think he said it himself. And so right now, you're experimenting both on the outside and the inside. And I'm fine with that given his length, right? He's got Richard Sherman-esque length, 31 and 7/8 inch arms. He's got crazy length, which makes him an outside guy, or can make him an outside guy. But he's 5'10, he's 190. He's like a K1 Williams type of build. The tackling needs to improve, probably. The physicality needs to be there. But he has the speed for the 49ers blitzing. He's got the length, which means he can cover. And he really just has the athletic profile that the 49ers covet at the position. So I want to see more reps of Womack on the inside, and I want to see less of Dennard. I just want to see less of Dennard. Because the 49ers are going to probably bring back Jason Verrett whenever he comes back healthy in training camp. 49ers have Ambry Thomas as well, who showed flashes last offseason, who showed flashes during the season. And like we mentioned earlier, there's videos that he's increased with a significant amount of muscle. So he could potentially compete to play in the slot, if not be quality depth on the outside. I want to see more of these guys in the slot. I want to see more of them, and I want to see what can they do now with pads on, right? I think that slot position can only be solidified with pads on because that's the only way you question physicality. That's the main thing for me, and so that's how my main question gets answered. So that's why I'm more confused, although it's more on the optimistic side given the amount of options we have.
No, I think you're totally right. Like in terms of like Dennard, right? Like I don't think Dennard's going to get much run during training camp. Like I think he's going to end up losing out on the battle. And only reason why I think so is because like you have all this assets invested in
Right,
the quarterback positions, and
right.
you're really going to allow Dennard to beat these dudes out, like or like you're going to
So
give Dennard
it's
the
a roster
more.
building. You're wasting a roster spot, and you're potentially losing out on another player. Like if Womack is as good as people think he is right now, you cannot keep him on the practice squad. If you try, he's probably going to get picked up elsewhere, right? So that's the thing for me.
And like for like Denard, right? Like he's a guy we know who he is. Like you could cut him, and he probably wouldn't even get picked up after training camp for like a week or two, because of the fact that he was. It sucks to say, and I'm not trying to bash him or anything. He was a safety net for the 49ers when they had to pick him up, like off the rosters. Just he was just there, right? So if he had 49ers had him last year like that, they could do the same thing for him. And at the end of the day, I think the opportunity is going to be given to these young guys to compete. It sucks to see Denominator Lenore struggling, because I've heard he's struggling right now in camp. Mini camp, heard he struggled. Ambry Thomas should be a guy who I hope competes. We also have Tariq
Castro.
Castro Fields, who is a guy I think is better suited for either safety or outside. And I think he's a better suited safety than he is slot corner and outside. But like I personally think he's best suited at safety. But the thing is if he goes outside, there's already so many dudes outside, right? They have like Ward, they have Mosley, Ambry Thomas who played outside. Who else do they have? They have Verrett who's going to be competing. So for me, it's one of those ones where it's like, wow, like, all right, what are we doing at this point? Because at the end of the day, the 49ers got to figure out who's going to be their slot corner, because right now that's their biggest hole on the defensive side of the ball, in my opinion. Safety isn't too big of a hole, because you have Jimmy Ward that could cover a lot of ground and cover a lot of the mistakes that Hufanga might make. But it sounds like Hufanga isn't even making mistakes. He's actually correcting Jimmy Ward in practice. Like that's Jimmy Ward said there was one where they had a call and he called out right. Hufanga called out right. And Jimmy Ward, due to the motion and everything, Jimmy Ward didn't call it out. And it actually corrected where Jimmy Ward was supposed to be. And Jimmy Ward, luckily, he heard and they rotated the right way. So just stuff like that is like, wow, like this young player's IQ is there. So that's why it doesn't make the secondary or the safety position as big of a hole as I thought. And I've always thought Hufanga was going to be a decent safety in the NFL. Like the instincts, everything is there. But I'm just very worried about that slot position. And going forward, do the 49ers need to even eventually make a trade for someone that's in the slot position? Do they need to let one of these young bucks just take the bullets and learn on the fly? What do they do to make sure their slot corner is legit and it's not a big time threat? Because I don't know if you remember last when the 49ers played the Dolphins last, right? When they had that Brian Allen game.
Brian Allen.
Because the slot could turn into a Brian Allen situation if we really think about it. The slot is usually where the best receivers are lined up. That slot player is lining up with Cooper Kupp two times out of the year. Lining up with some of the best dudes in the NFL inside the slot. The NFL lines up their best receivers in the slot to get them that advantage.
Justin Jefferson, he plays in the slot a ton. Yeah.
Devontae Adams likes to line up in the slot a lot. Like the stuff like that. Like these guys are starting to learn. Like the NFL is starting to learn. Like, well, if I put my guy in the slot, it's harder to get your hands on him, because now he could break in and out, and it's harder for a corner to actually defend. Versus if he's outside, I could more so protect the outside and that vertical threat rather than an inside, like stuff like that. So for the 49ers, they got to figure something out at that nickel corner spot, right? And whether it's Womack, whether it's who, what do you think at the end of the day the 49ers should do at that spot?
Yeah, and before I give my thoughts, 49er media points out that he could see Denard making it. Shanahan loves the vets. We saw this last offseason where they signed vets just because they needed them. But I don't know if there is a ton of cases where Shanahan has picked certain vets over rookies or over players that he's had not significant, but a financial investment to. Whereas that's the case here, right? Because guys like Womack, right, you drafted. You pay him guaranteed money as opposed to Denard. Guys like Castro Fields, you did the same thing. And then a guy like Jason Verrett is just outright better than Darqueze Denard when he's healthy. And so if you can get him healthy, that's important. And if not, you put him on the PUP list for 6 games and have him come back after that, right? So that's why I think this case is a little different. CJ Gray points out that Womack will be the starter next year in the slot in 2023. And I'll go off of this point, because when we talk about the slot, I think based on what we've heard from reports, Womack has impressed, and I would not be surprised if he's a starter in 2022. I would like the competition to be between 3 players. it would be well, it's essentially between two and then contingent on Jason Verrett, right? If Jason Verrett's out of the picture, then I want it to be between Ambry Thomas, who we saw bulk up, but we also saw has the athletic profile to be a actual cornerback in the NFL, which, like you said, receivers are now great in the slot. You need an actual NFL cornerback build type of player in that slot position to keep up with these receivers. Otherwise, that's a point where the 49ers will keep getting exploited. We saw it sometimes last offseason where people would pick on the shark with bigger receivers or with faster receivers. And some like Cooper Kupp worked out of the slot against us in the NFC Championship game and worked pretty well. And so to me, that slot needs to be a cornerback with an actual build. So I'd like it between Thomas and I'd like it between Samuel Womack, and the other guy is essentially the quality depth guy that you can put at multiple positions in the secondary. So that's who I'd like it between. But if Verrett is in the equation, I'd like to see it Verrett kind of be handled in that mix. And if you want to be on the side of caution, maybe push Emmanuel Moseley to the slot. I'm less intrigued about that idea. I think Emmanuel Moseley belongs on the outside at the moment. I think he's proven that he can play on the outside, but I wouldn't be opposed to it if it keeps our best three cornerbacks on the field. Marco, I think you're muted.
I was muted. So the good thing with Samuel Womack, right, is like one of those ones like he's a smaller dude, super long arms, but he has that dog in him, right? He has this mentality where I don't care who I wind up with, I don't
Right.
care what it is, I'm better than you. And that's what I love with the young corners because you have to have that mentality. So I think Womack is a great player for the slot. I didn't like the pick. I'll be honest. I'm not going to see him like, oh, I love drafting Samuel Womack. I'm gonna be straight up. I did not like the draft pick. I didn't. I thought there was better players on the board at the time. But hearing that he's playing well in the slot, right? And then there's a when Ryan said about the young guys like Tariq Castro Fields and him. He's saying like they're doing their thing. They're pushing. He's excited for what they're. His quote was, "The young guys we brought in with Tariq and Samuel, those guys have done a great job with coming in and doing what they're supposed to do, and I'm really pushing those guys. It is going to be great to see those guys coming back and coming to camp when it's real football and it's time to take off." So D'Amico is pretty much saying, I'm excited to see these dudes with pads. Like, I don't care what they're doing right now. Like, I'm pushing them. You better come back with pads. You better come out to hit because those two dudes, and when I've watched the tape, they're physical dudes. So it's harder to be physical in mini camp and stuff like that when there's no pads on, there's no contact. So it's going to be exciting to see these young cats with the pads, with the helmets on, and actually thumping and stuff like that. So I personally think it'll be between Ambry Thomas in the slot and Samuel Womack in the slot. I think Denard gets cut, even though he's a veteran, even though 49ers don't need a veteran in the cornerback room. They have Charvarius Ward, who is a veteran. They have Emmanuel Moseley, who is a veteran, Jimmy Ward, who is a veteran, and they just brought back Jason Verrett. That's 4 veterans in that room. Obviously, Jason Verrett, injury concerns, he might go down, but he is a vet in that locker room. I don't think they need Denard in the locker room to be a veteran presence.
Yeah, I mean, I have no objections here. I think that, like you said, we have the veteran presence, and really the main thing is we have those dogs, right? You talk about that mentality. That's the most important thing that you need in this as a cornerback. You can't really function without that mentality because there are so many times where cornerbacks will just get burnt. Cornerbacks will have bad plays, so you need to be able to pick yourself up and continue to play football. We have a guy like that in Jimmy Ward who talks whatever he wants to talk because he thinks his play can back it up, and I love that about him. Ambry Thomas had that dog in him in the second half of the season, and he himself said his confidence continued to increase because of the people around him and just because of who he is as the season went along last year. You brought in a guy in Charvarius Ward who definitely isn't afraid to open his mouth at any point, even if it means he gets burned and gets a touchdown on him. So I think that that's important. Samuel Womack now fits the description as well. And so that's why I like the camaraderie of the locker room, even if there are questions about the play. And yeah, I don't think that Darquise Dennard ends up being the starter. And if he is week 1, I would be a little bit disappointed and I'd be a little bit confused just because even if Denard might be just a sliver better than whoever it is right now, I think it is a misallocation of a roster spot.
And I absolutely 100% agree with you. I think, like you're saying, like we have the dogs who have that mentality to speak up, and that's what you need in that cornerback room. Because I started noticing Jimmy Ward took on that approach last year, or even the year before, calling dudes out on social media, right? Going to Instagram, talking about I clamped this dude. I can't wait. He even said, I can't wait to line DK Metcalf up. What a square shot with Drew Lock. And he's coming out with that mentality. I mean, if you're talking about the mentality, you better bring like that energy because these young cats are going to thrive on that. And that's something that the 49ers defense has lacked, right? They've been very, very good, but they've lacked that I don't know what word I'm looking for, but they've lacked that, I guess, not underdog mentality because they played like that, but like just that dog mentality, I guess. Like, that's what the best way to put it. Like, there's no way for me to put it like that nastiness in the secondary where if you're running over the middle, I'm gonna pop you in the mouth kind of mentality. And
Yeah.
I'm happy to see it back, man. It's very good to see Jimmy Ward and then bringing in Charvarius Ward, who loves to talk shit. Like it's amazing.
Yeah, definitely. And CJ Gray talks about Jason Verrett. What about him in the slot? Now, for me, Jason Verrett, I wouldn't be opposed to the idea. I think that this would put your best three cornerbacks on the field. However, it's all up to Jason Verrett and how his body responds. If his body can take on the physicality that the slot cornerback position brings, by all means take it. Because like the 49ers are versatile. It's not like one guy's in the slot every single play, right? You'll put Jimmy Ward in the slot at times. Maybe you even put Fred Warner in the slot at times to carry to take on tight ends, and then you have your traditional slot corner. And sometimes you don't even use a slot corner in certain packages, right? 20% of the time. So it's the amount of versatility, but it's all up to Jason Verrett and how his body responds because there is the amount of tackling that is required from the slot position. There's the amount of blitzing that is required, especially in this 49ers offense or defense. There's the amount of blitzing that is required. And so if Jason Verrett can take on those tasks, then I'm down for the idea. But if he can't, then he's better relegated as an outside corner. And if he proves himself to be at a level like his old self, then you might consider putting one of the outside guys into the slot like an Emmanuel Mosley.
I'd personally prefer Emmanuel Mosley in the slot and Jason Verrett outside. I just personally think Jason Verrett, the smaller build in terms of like his frame and the wear and tear it has on your body being in the slot, I would rather have him outside than inside. So it's one of those ones where if he could be healthy, that secondary freaking goes another step because what he was in 2020, was it one? 2021, he
Yeah.
played phenomenal. He played phenomenal. If they could get that Jason Verrett back, Emmanuel Mosley should go straight to the slot. If I was Emmanuel Mosley, I wouldn't even care. I'd be like, all right, send me to the slot. That dude's a legit corner. I'm still going to get my bag because I played very damn good outside and inside. And the NFL's secondary is kind of going away from being just an outside guy or just a slot guy. Look at Jalen Ramsey, right? That dude plays in the slot. He plays outside. He plays that star role, the safety role. He does everything. If you can do anything, like same thing with Charvarius Ward, he can line up anywhere. Line me up inside, line me up outside. I don't care. You're gonna get the bag eventually if you could do stuff like that. So I'm excited to see whatever the 49ers secondary looks like. Going to the next thing, right? So we just got news that the young leader of the 49ers franchise wants to stay another week, right? What does that tell you? Because like this dude has gotten bashed on social media by all these dudes, like, oh, he's not a good leader, he's not this, he's not that. What does it tell you?
He's coming for y'all. Anybody who talked on his name, he's coming for y'all, man. This guy has just a mentality that is unquestionably just like everybody wants to create narratives, right? Oh, this guy isn't prepared enough. This guy isn't ready. He is showing you out in the world that he is ready. And like I think one thing that couldn't be questioned since the day he was drafted was his work ethic, right? As soon as the offseason ended, he wanted to go back to work. That was last year too. And even Kyle Shanahan said last offseason he wanted Trey Lance to just take a break following the offseason program before training camp because Trey Lance was so dedicated and want to get back to work in those 40 days before training camp. And now, I mean, you've seen it. Like he worked in Los Angeles, he worked in Atlanta at times this past offseason with various quarterback coach experts, right? John Beck, Quincy Avery, and then he works with his own group in Southern California, right? He works with Brandon Ayuk, he works with his receivers rooms, and then he's back in the building in May, is it, or April? I forget the month. I think it's May. Back in the building, and now he's impressing everybody during these practices. And now, for everyone saying it's only practice, well, guess what? He's staying back another week. It's just who he is as a person. He's being composed in the media. He looks like a seasoned veteran in the media, and so I don't want to just keep hyping him up because obviously, like I've said multiple times, he's the question mark. But there was a quote that I saw, I forget from who, but if Trey Lance can just show a sliver that show he is a sliver better than Jimmy Garoppolo, look where the 49ers were last season. Look where they could be this season, right? That's all I'm going to say on the topic. Now, the 49ers need to obviously nothing will be found until they go on the field and show that they can replicate their last season's success with a different quarterback. But at this moment, everything is trending up for Trey Lance, and it really those rumors and reports about him being not ready slowly starting to dissipate as the season comes closer.
And it's great to hear that he's staying back. Like what I see is I've talked to some people, right? And then I went on the Bobby Karan show of ESPN. And first thing Bobby Karan talked about, right, when he brought up Trey Lance was that he's been speaking to someone around the 49ers through ESPN. So someone that is connected to the 40, because he works for ESPN Honolulu, but they're connected to the 49ers through whatever the case may be, right? Whatever. He goes, this person told me that they see a quarterback that knows what it takes to win in the NFL. He knows the work that it takes to be great in the NFL. And that's all I need to know, right? A quarterback that knows what it takes, the drive, the everything that is needed is all I need to know about Trey Lance. That work ethic is what it is, and I'm excited to see Trey Lance with Kyle Shanahan for the next 5 to 10 years, maybe even longer. I'm hoping 10 to 20 years. That's my hope. 10 to 20 years of a young Trey Lance. At the age of 41 with Kyle Shanahan, understanding that system. Um, is there any player in particular, Rohan, that you got excited about from minicamp?
Yeah, I'll say one name and really nothing again. This is all with the caveat that we won't know too much before training camp, but one name was Ray McLeod who kept popping up. And Ray McLeod was brought in this offseason on a 2-year deal worth up to 4.4 million, although it is a little more favorably structured for the 49ers. And McLeod was brought in primarily as a special teamer, right? But Brian Schneider talked about him, and I'll say a couple of things about McLeod, not only from the receiver standpoint, but first, when Brian Schneider was talking about what he wanted out of his special teams unit, he talked about Owen Burks and his athleticism. He talked about George Odom and his tackling ability, but he was extremely, extremely happy when he got Ray McLeod, a guy with his ability in the return game for just not only from the punt return, but also kick return wise. Like that's what Brian Schneider was happy about. And really, that's what's going to help him propel this unit from a bottom 5 unit to at least an average unit. And so McLeod was brought in as a special teamer, but he's proven to be much, much more. In an offense that has featured Brandon Ayuk, Jawan Jennings, and Danny Gray this offseason, Ray McLeod has been a mainstay. And then on a day where all the top 5 receivers or 4 receivers were out, Ray McLeod showed out in this last practice. He was the number 1 target against this defense and still caught I think it was 4 passes out of 6 targets and was pretty efficient with the ball in his hands. So we've seen that Ray McLeod, his hands aren't necessarily an issue. We've known he has fumble issues, but at least it's a good sign that his hands aren't necessarily as big of an issue as before indicated, which is important, especially in the way that Trey Lance throws. With as hard as he throws, it's important to have surefire hands. And so that's a name that we've seen at least flash, right? We don't know how he'll be because obviously with his size, pads are going to be important to see if he can maintain and hold on to the football. But at the moment, that's a guy that people should be excited for.
And absolutely, everyone should be excited about Ray McLeod, right? That speed, that element he brings. Obviously, he hasn't had like those big time plays in the NFL yet, but with Kyle Shanahan, I think he's going to have those explosive plays with Kyle Shanahan. A guy that I was very excited to hear about and very excited to see is the freak Drake Jackson. Um, I was very excited when the 49ers drafted him. He was one of the guys when the pick came up. I was on Jesse Naylor's of Last Second Sports, and I was saying I hope they take Drake Jackson here. This is a guy on the board who they should definitely pounce on him right now. Like they need another edge rusher opposite of Nick Bosa, and then Nick Bosa goes on record saying he does stuff that I wasn't able to do when I was a rookie. That hearing stuff like that from a guy like Nick Bosa is very, very, very high because Nick Bosa doesn't go out and he doesn't praise people for no reason. He praises you for a damn reason. And I'm excited to hear Nick Bosa praising Drake Jackson. And I'm excited to see the 49ers package their NASCAR package with Drake Jackson, Nick Bosa, and guys, and the speed rush that they have. Any guys that disappointed you, Rohan?
Disappointing. That's hard because I tend to temper expectations during this time, really. But if we talk about really disappointing, one sec, bring them back. There we go. But if we talk about disappointing, uh, oof, ooh, that's a good question. That's a good question. Really, it's not necessarily indicative of the players that played, but at the linebacker position, we don't have Azeez Al-Shire or Fred Warner out there. And it's a good thing and a bad thing, right? You obviously don't get the reps with the starting defense, but also you get to see the other guys out there, right? You get to see some of the other you get to see the undrafted free agent linebackers that we have. We have a ton of those guys. We get to see Trey Greenlaw in a bigger capacity, and you get to see Orrin Burks and Demetrius Flanagan Fowles in more expanded roles. And so there are several positions like that, right? We can talk about the offensive line where Mike McGlinchey isn't there. Um, you can even talk about the secondary, right, where which we just talked about. But to me, the disappointing factor isn't necessarily of play because I don't like to go in that way, but it's more in there are certain people who are nursing injuries that aren't there, so you can't necessarily see the entire unit in this small capacity. But maybe if we're talking about disappointing, I'll say one last thing. And you mentioned the name earlier, but it's Diamondre Lenore. Like you expected him to be the starter, or at least run away as a starter this offseason, right? You'd at least want him to be the starter come at the beginning of the offseason. But I think it was indicative last year when Diamond Lenore, the guy who was on the team for 17 straight weeks, was passed up in favor of Darquise Dennard in Week 18. Lenore was inactive. Dennard actually got like 32% of the defensive snaps in Week 18, and he was signed off another practice squad from another team just a week and a half ago. So that to me was indicative that the team didn't really trust Lenore, and he hasn't been seen in a featured role this offseason either. What do you think?
I think that was the guy I was going to go with. I was going to go Denominal Lenore, being the guy that so far has disappointed me in terms of my expectations for him. Right, I expected him to be a starter already at this point, or at least putting his name in there in the starting role for that slot role, that nickel corner role, because he was drafted. I thought he was better suited to play inside than outside. Sadly, he hasn't done that. Another guy I would probably say would probably be a guy like Daniel Brunson. And it's not because Daniel Brunson isn't practicing or anything. It's because hearing that news about his knee tendonitis, right? It kind of like it's just disappointing that like another player on the 49ers is I shouldn't say very injured, but is injured. Like he has to rehab that knee. And knowing what knee tendonitis is and knowing the history of players with knee tendonitis, it worries me. So it technically is disappointing, but it's not disappointing of the player. It's just disappointing to hear that news. So I wouldn't necessarily say I'm disappointed in this certain player. I was just more disappointed in the news of hearing that he has knee tendonitis. But I would definitely for sure go Denominal Lenore as being the guy that has so far has disappointed in camp or mini
Yeah,
camp.
yeah, definitely. And I mean, I wasn't as ecstatic about the pick last year. When I was grading the class last year in an article or in a video, I remember Diamond Lenore was my lowest grade for the entire class, and and he was a fifth round pick, right? But I graded the pick a B minus. Obviously, it doesn't matter as much, but I wasn't as ecstatic because I thought there wasn't necessarily a space on this roster for him. Like he was an outside corner at Oregon, but he projected to be an inside corner. But did he have the tackling or the physicality for it? That was a question mark. And as we saw in the NFL right now, his coverage is a question mark as well, which I thought was his bread coming out of the like NCAA, out of the college realm. And so, really, I don't know if there's a spot for him currently on this roster. because there's so much depth, and the 49ers do like Darqueze Dennard for some reason. There could be a chance that Deommodore Lenoir doesn't make the 53-man roster, I think, this offseason, given the amount of depth that we have. As unfortunate as it is, he's a fifth-round pick from last year, and while you can consider fifth-round picks like to be fifth-round picks, quality depth guys, Lenoir was inactive for certain games last year, especially down the stretch, meaning they didn't believe he was even like a quality enough player to play special teams, which is important for those bottom of the roster guys. And so if he isn't as quality of a special teams player, and if other guys they brought in this offseason are, then I don't know where the spot is right now for Lenoir on this roster.
And I agree. He's the guy that's so far on the radar of potentially being a guy that gets cut, which is very sad because he was drafted in the fifth round. But if the 49ers cut him, I would not be disappointed. Because to me, that's the 49ers front office actually saying, hey, you know what? We missed on the pick. Oh, well, cut him.
Yeah,
There's some teams in this industry, and the 49ers were like this for prior to the Shanahan and Lynch era, where they would keep these guys on the roster even though they weren't good. Like, and I'm not saying Denominator Lenore isn't good, but what I'm saying is like there it used to be a trend where the 49ers were like, oh, we drafted him though. We're gonna give him another chance. We're gonna give him one more chance, two more chance. Like, bro, what are we doing here? Just cut the guy. Like, so I would not be disappointed if they ended up cutting him because the 49ers realizing their mistake and they're moving on. And so not too much of a big deal. Go with the best guys in the room, whether if that's Denard, who they felt was a better option over Demo. It is what it is. I'm not too concerned.
yeah, definitely. And really, I don't think it speaks voices about sorry, not Lenore, but really the entirety of our room, right? Because right now you have Charvarius Ward, you have Emmanuel Mosley, Ambry Thomas. I think those three are locks. Then we talk about Sam Womack, who should make the roster because of his draft status. Same with Tariq Castro Fields, who will probably play special teams with his length and his speed. So that's five guys already on the roster. You probably have one more that makes the roster. Assuming Jason Verrett goes on the PUP list, could that last guy be Lenoir? He could be. Could it be Denard? He could be. But if Verrett is healthy, he's that sixth guy. If not, then we don't know who that sixth guy is. And I think, given how competitions have gone, that other guy could just be another player. If the 49ers want to take on another safety slash cornerback hybrid, that's Dante Johnson. And they guaranteed Dante Johnson, I think, like $700,000 this year. So he's making the roster as well.
And that's the thing that too, right? Like the 49ers have Dante Johnson, who we haven't really talked about. Like a lot of people are. It's one of those ones where a lot of the 49ers media hasn't really talked about Dante Johnson, right? But I'm pretty sure there's a roster spot for Dante Johnson somewhere. He's
Yeah.
capable of playing that safety role, that corner role. He's a great special teamer, whether people don't like him or not, whether they still carry that mind of Dante Johnson in the past. Dante Johnson last year and the year prior was a very solid depth guy. And for the 49ers to have Dante Johnson on the roster, I'm excited for. I don't care if people take that clip because I know a couple people will take the clip and they'll like, oh, Dante Johnson. Dante Johnson was a very solid depth piece for the 49ers last year and the year prior. And he's going to continue to be a depth piece. He started at safety a few times. He played well at safety. He's played well in the nickel. He's played well outside. He plays great special teams. And you need guys like that who don't make much money but can contribute to multiple positions and especially be a good special teamer, and that's something Dante Johnson does well.
Yeah, and like I said just a minute ago, his contract indicates that he's making the roster. $712,000 in guaranteed money indicates that he'll make the roster. I think that might be even more than what Deommodore Lenoir is guaranteed for 2022. And even if it isn't, at this moment, it's about play, right? And so you might relegate Lenoir to the practice squad and try and develop him if he doesn't get claimed. But Dante Johnson he is a valuable player, and at the moment, the reason I think he hasn't been talked about much is because he's gotten most of his reps at free safety this offseason. That's something that's gone underrated because Talanoa Hufanga has emerged. Like you said, Talanoa Hufanga has been good, and we played a lot of cover. Or I'd assume we're going to play a lot of cover one man this next coming off season or not offseason, this next coming season, meaning Hufanga can be in the box for a majority of the time where he can utilize his talents to the best of his ability while Jimmy Ward is the overhang. But like I just said, Johnson has played a good amount of safety this past offseason. So Johnson could be a guy in the overhang spot if they want Jimmy Ward up in the box, if they want Ward in the slot or something like that. And yeah, I do think that he is a valuable player and that there's going to be a spot for him on this roster.
And I think too, like, so we're saying Dante Johnson is like a lock to make the roster, right? But at the same time, Dante Johnson might be that dude because we saw it last year. The dude that gets cut to keep a guy to eventually stash that guy on whatever the case may be. Like, because I remember last year they cut Dante Johnson initially and they stashed a guy on the IR to keep them
Right.
for the
That
following
could
year.
very
Right.
much be Jason Verrett this year. Like that's what they might need to do, right? Like Jason Verrett goes to the PUP right after being put on the 53-man roster, and then Dante Johnson comes back. Yeah,
Because Dante Johnson, he did that last year for the 49ers, I believe. If I'm not mistaken, they did that last year with him.
yeah, they
They
did.
they cut him, but they already had this agreement. Hey, we're not cutting you, but we're cutting you. No one's gonna claim you, obviously, because you don't go onto the waivers because you're a veteran. So what we want to do is we want to bring you back. So he could be that guy. Hey, you're making 712 guaranteed. What we're gonna do is we got that money guaranteed to you. We're gonna cut you. We're gonna keep this rookie. We're gonna stash this rookie on the IR to pretty much redshirt him, because that's what they do. If they think this rookie's decent enough, they'll redshirt him, allow him to get back, and they'll allow him to start practicing and getting in that strength conditioning room with those coaches, and then they'll bring Dante Johnson right back. So that's a way to keep him on the roster, but also stash one of your players. So for example, it could be the nominal Lenore. Hey, you need more time working, or for example, Tariq Castro Fields, you need more time on the IRs, getting stronger, getting faster, working on your technique, stuff like that. So that's why I think Dante Johnson is a valuable guy on this roster because he's willing to do stuff like that for the 49ers. He just wants to be around the 49ers organization. He loves the 49ers organization since he's came back and he spoke highly of them. So I'm excited to have actually him. It's kind of weird that we're actually talking about Dante Johnson like this because most people bash on the guy, but honestly, Dante Johnson is a good depth piece for the 49ers.
Yeah, and one thing I just searched up in terms of dead cap hits, Deamara Lenore only has a 213,000 dead cap hit this year. So just compared to, I mean, and this is for the entirety of the remainder of his contract. Like Lenore, or it might be not, yeah, it is 213,000 because his signing bonus was only 70K a year, around 280K. So Deamara Lenore, I don't think it's that far fetched to say that he's a cap casualty this year, just because of how his play has been and because of the amount of people around the roster. But regarding your point on the IR, yeah, that could definitely happen. Especially given Jason Brett likely spent some time on the PUP or the IR list to begin the season if he isn't fully healthy.
So another thing with the 49ers, right? Their offensive line, obviously question marks. Their secondary has only one question mark at the slot, nickel, whatever, inside quarterback role. Um, there's another the big hole, right, on the 49ers I personally see. Um, it hasn't gotten talked about much, right? So we're gonna talk about it a little bit. The 49ers coaching, there's only one guy in the position rooms, right, that has stayed in that spot. They've had a lot of people move around, whether they've gotten promoted, whether they've left. Does that affect the 49ers in any way going forward on the offense side of the ball? Because obviously they have a new quarterback coach, new receiver coaches. Does that affect the 49ers going forward, Ron?
So I'll say yes and no because I mean, coaching turnover obviously means new voices every time, and that can be a good and a bad thing, right? Obviously, if the voices were working, then it sucks to see them go because you have to now answer to a new person, and that's in the case of tight ends coach. I forget his name, the one that George Kittle really liked that we unfortunately let go. I'm forgetting his name, but Brian Fleury now is the new tight ends coach. But in the case of Wes Welker, it was reported that he might have not been a big voucher of Trey Lance, him and Rich Scarangello last offseason. So it's fine to let him go in that way because obviously you want the coaching staff to be in unison. And the benefit that this has brought to the wide receiver room, and really to the offensive room in general. At the top three skill position coaches, meaning quarterbacks, running backs, and wide receivers, the 49ers have a player or a coach who has been a player in the NFL, meaning they have coaching or playing experience and now have coaching experience as well. Brian Greasy played in the NFL, Leonard Hankerson played in the NFL, and Anthony Lynn played in the NFL. And I think that's important because they can relay that game type experience, which other coaches just don't have. You can have the coaching experience, but that playing experience is unique. And I think that that's something new to the 49ers coaching staff this offseason that can definitely help them. And again, we've mentioned this before, but I think it's important to reiterate the brain trust of this entire offensive coaching staff is Kyle Shanahan. Wherever, no matter what happens to his offensive coaching staff, you have to entrust that Kyle Shanahan can be the offensive play caller that he's known to be, and that is really where this offense goes because he's directly involved, and I think that that's important. And also talking about a coach that could be on the rise in a year or two with the 49ers, Clay Kubiak, the quarterback's coach or the assistant. I don't know exactly what his role is, but Clay Kubiak has been hands-on with Trey Lance. It seems a little more than Brian Greasy. So I'm interested to see the trajectory of Clay Kubiak's kind of coaching staff elevation as the years come.
So I don't know if it was you or if it was David Lichty, but I had said for a little while, like, and I wanted Clay Kubiak to be promoted within this organization because obviously he was a quality control coach for a little while
Right.
last year, and I just kept saying like this guy comes from a very big family background of um, lineage, NFL lineage, right? So for me, I was like, man, like Kubiak is a guy who hopefully gets promoted. And for me, I wanted him to become either the actual quarterback coach or Kyle to like, hey, rapid promote him, get him to your offensive coordinator guy, make him your offensive coordinator. He knows the system. His dad obviously is one of the reasons Kyle Shanahan like was taught around everything. So for me, it's like, yeah, you do rapid promote him, and it would be very premature. But you actually keeping a guy who you can't really interview him. If you want to interview him for coordinator position, you can't interview him because I could decline it. I don't think you can now and stuff like that. Like there's the new rules and everything. But Clay Kubiak is a legit coach, and I think eventually he will become the 49ers offensive coordinator with everything he knows. Obviously, he has a couple brothers in the NFL coaching. His dad was in the NFL coaching for a very long time. He understands his system probably just as good as Kyle. Honestly, to be 100% honest with you, he probably understands the system just as good as Kyle, due to who his dad is. Obviously, his dad, Kyle, took some stuff from Gary Kubiak and as well as his father and everything. So for the 49ers to have a young coach like Clay Kubiak, it's very nice to see um, these young guys. And do I think it, obviously, I went on a rant about Clay Kubiak, but do I think it affects the 49ers? I think it affects them early on in the season. In terms of how do they go about things during game days, and I think Kyle will have them in a good position in terms of he does a lot of times what he did last year. Since he had like these young guys during the preseason, he pushes all the workload on them. You guys handle everything. It's just a preseason game because if you get them in that stress during a preseason game, when the actual season comes, they kind of like get out that they wrinkle everything off the shirt when it's wrinkled, right? They iron everything out, and I think that's what Kyle was good at. He did it for D'Amico Ryans. He did it last year for Mike McDaniel to learn how to like tell Kyle what he's looking for and stuff like that. So it's exciting to see. I think, like I said, do think it will affect them early on in the season, but after like week 2, week 3, I think the 49ers will be totally fine with their coaching staff, and I do like the former NFL players in the room because it could teach you how to do this here, do this, try this. You know, you're mentally you're going a little cuckoo right now because of your play. Try this out. This helped me when I was in your position. So I'm excited for the 49ers to get things rolling, especially with at the direction they're headed. They're young and talented with a good young head coach. It's time to go get that 6th Lombardi trophy.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think that that's a good way to wrap up today's episode. Going to get that Lombardi trophy. That's the most important task for the 49ers this offseason or this upcoming season. And really what this entire offseason buildup has been for getting that 6th Lombardi trophy. And at this point, the 49ers have built a competent enough roster where they can go ahead and try and achieve that goal. But Marco, thank you so much for the episode. 49ers Red Zone is back. Be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube. Go check us out on Apple Podcasts. Go check us out on all other platforms, and we appreciate it. Any last thoughts before we tune off today?
All right, Rohan, thank you for holding it down. I know you're going to be gone for a few days. Enjoy Wisconsin, brother. Enjoy your new student orientation and everything. That should be fun. Enjoy that moment because your college life is going to go like this. I promise you, 4 years will go by really fast. And that's it for today's episode. Thank you for tuning in.
Thank you.